Well, hello there. This is Nancy Love from Los Angeles, California, for the Planet Peace Project. I want to make something abundantly clear, and I want to make that clear right now. But first, I have to check my telephone because it's doing stuff, and I'm already live. So let me just, okie doke. This is good. I just got an alert that I'm live on Facebook. Live on YouTube. Thank you, Google. So, here's the deal. I made a video recently, and it talks about fake Jews, but also fake Christians. And the Jews specifically that I was speaking of were some rabbis I know, and the Christians, or so-called Christians, that I was speaking of specifically were fake ministers that I know, all of whom are in, yes, you guessed it, Los Angeles, California. One of the rabbis was making horrifyingly inappropriate sexual comments and innuendos and offers to me, which I'm not in the market for. And he then said that I was too beautiful, too articulate, and too self assured. And he wished that I could be homeless for a while or something like that so that I would be more dirty and ragged. In other words, he was confirming my lifelong suspicion that most human males can't handle a woman who's smarter than they are. And I'm definitely smarter than he is, probably by a factor of at least four. And articulate, uh, confident, powerful in my own right. Um, and he just really failed me on every level, as a friend, as any kind of spiritual leader whatsoever. And that's why I was so angry. But it got worse from there because then he lied about it. And then he started to claim that the conversation never took place. Well, it did. And everyone knows that now. He tried to gaslight someone who has one of the highest IQs in the world, is entirely sane, has an excellent memory, and is extremely honest. I also have an audiographic memory. I do not have a photographic memory like Bill Clinton and other people. I have an audiographic memory. I don't remember everything I see or read necessarily, but I do remember everything I hear, word for word. And I was tested with an audiographic memory when I was a child because I used to scare the heck out of my teachers. They could say something mean spirited to an errant child, and then I could repeat it word for word for word for word for word, and in front of the principal, and that uh, teachers would run from me because they started calling me a human tape recorder, and later on a human CD recorder, and you don't get by gaslighting me. If you tell me something, unless we've all been Mandelaed and that probable timeline split off somewhere and we're not in it. Nope. I remember what you said. He's got dementia. Only someone who has dementia would say the kinds of things he said to me, come on to me romantically, and then tell me, but he really wanted me to be dirty and ragged and so forth. And that was really disgusting, and I doubt that I will ever forgive him for that insult. He did not just insult me and my what he called beauty and articulate confidence, and he said even eloquence. He insulted all men. He insulted all men. Let me tell you what happened when I was a kid. Parents in the neighborhood knew each other, and kindergarten wasn't a big thing way, 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 way back then in the dark ages. But the parents in my neighborhood wanted their 6-year-old kids to know a few other kids, so that on their first day of school, they didn't feel so frightened or alone, and they would go to school and have friends already there. So some parents arranged a play date. and I was 6, and a fellow who came to the play date, among others, um, was still 5. He was going to be 6 before the start of the school year, but he was a whopping 6 months older than I was. I mean, he was a whopping 6 months younger than I was, right? I'm 6, he's 5, and we got along like ducks on water. We got along. We became lifelong friends. And we actually did date and consider marrying once we were in high school. He was very literally that boy I met when I was 5, one of the great loves of my entire life. And neither of us knew what the heck sex was. We weren't that sophisticated in those years. Children didn't have the internet. Children, TV wasn't bombarding little kids with sexual knowledge. Lucy and Desi slept in separate twin beds, okay? And we didn't know what the heck sex was, but we knew we loved each other. And once he left, I said, I think I've done something you adults call fall in love. And my family was all thrilled. And they thought it was cute. And I said, but there's a problem. I'm older than he is. And is it okay? I mean, do I have like society's permission to be in love with someone that I'm older than? And they said, of course, Nancy, why do you think that? I said, well, because from what I can tell, the way male female relationships work here is that the man has to be bigger, smarter, wealthier, stronger, older, and everything more. The woman, the female in the relationship has to be less of everything in order for that to happen. And if I'm already older than he is and that will never change, how can I be less than he is? And they were so shocked and they were so saddened and they were wringing their hands about what society had already taught this precious little girl who already thought she was going to have to be less than in order to be loved. So, do you know that 6 freaking decades later, and yes, I say things like freaking on my YouTube channel because I'm angry, and that's the nicest thing I can say right now and get away with it on YouTube without getting flagged. Do you know that 6 decades later, this rabbi, who I thought was just this sweet, smart person, confirmed the suspicions I had when I was only 6 years old that a man can't tolerate or love or admire or respect or want a woman who's more than he is. I'm taller than he is. I'm slightly younger than he is. I'm way freaking smarter than he is by at least a factor of 4. I'm possibly, I'm not sure, but I'm possibly more articulate and even eloquent than he is. I'm probably not as well read as he is in his particular realm of expertise, which is Judaism. But I did start reading from count them, all the world's major religions when I was only 7 years old. The same week, I demanded a book on subatomic physics because I thought I was so astute and I was right. I thought that physics and religions had essentially the same thing to teach me about the nature of reality, but they were going to be using different vernaculars and different perspectives. So, yeah, I'm not less than he is, and I'm not dirty, and I'm not ragged, but he is. And I'm having a really, really, really hard time not hating him because I consider him a massive failure as a so called religious leader. And I consider him a massive failure as a man. He got he got involved with some other people who tried to start a whole discrediting program, and it's really disgusting. I found out that some of the people that he's involved with are involved in thievery and all kinds of other criminality, and it's truly disgusting. And some of them claim to be Christians, which brings me to my next subject, which is that I'm not Jew bashing. I'm saying I'm misogynist bashing. That guy's a misogynist because he could not understand how a small little old man could be with someone as large as I am in all the important ways a woman can be grand. So, I also recently, I'm not Christian bashing either. I've embraced the Christ from earliest childhood. People used to call me Christ in a skirt by the time I was 4 years old because I was this big loving thing. I was this mother of everyone. And I was referred to as the Buddha of compassion by the mostly Southern Baptists in my Texas neighborhood. You know, Southern Baptists who never pronounced the word Buddha before were bowing in namaste position to me and saying, the Buddha of compassion has been recognized at 5. When does that happen in Texas? Well, it happened in the 60s and it happened to me. By the time I was 14, some people I knew in the United States military intelligence community in which I was raised, and friends I had even at that age at the National Security Agency were saying that I was just one of the most honest, reliably trustworthy people they had ever encountered. And they said, we think you're Lamed Vav, one of the 36 most righteous people on earth. And forever humble, I said, oh no, I can't possibly be one of the best we've got. Surely I have much work to do. I have many lessons and much evolution to go before I could be considered one of the best people on earth. But they said, no, Nancy, we know more people than you do. You really, really are one of the best we got. So, well, people still call me an innocent. People refer to me as a great lady. A great lady. And I know that in spite of threats and temptations to make me otherwise, I'm a person whose hands are very, very clean. I have clean hands. There are those who bear false witness against the good, however, and if you follow the Bible, there's a place in the New Testament that says in the end times, the good will be called bad, and the bad will be called good. One of the people I encountered recently and his associated deacons at this totally fake church in LA, big church, big building on a city block and all that, yada da yada da, big budget and so forth, turns out to be a complete fraud. He is a closeted gay who has been married. He was a wife beater whose wife divorced him for criminal assault. He is a drug addict. He is an alcoholic. He came on to me. I barely knew the guy. He started demanding to know if I would marry him. Basically, I think the second time we ever spoke, and he started saying things like, but my feet were too big. I said, I'm a big Swede. I'm descended from the big Swedes. I'm a Viking woman. You want small feet, go elsewhere, man. And he started criticizing my fingernails. They're too short. And he criticized my makeup. He called me, he had his deacon refer to me as a Jezebel and demand that I wash off my makeup and go around the church without eyeliner or whatever. And I'm going, you people are bonkers. How dare you? No one I know gets up and walks out the door in the morning unshowered, unshaved, they style their hair. Men, I know men that have permanent eyeliner and lip liner. I know men, and they're all in Hollywood, they're actors. Uh, I know Hollywood actors who are male who have permanent foundation sprayed on their face and stuff like that. One Hollywood actor has said he made sure that no one ever saw him without makeup by having it tattooed on his face because he got tired of people who knew what he looked like in film and television come up to him in public and say, "Hey, you look almost like that famous guy." you know. Same thing happened to a female actress in the airport in L.A. at LAX years ago. It was Michelle Gellar, and she was late for the airport. This was in the news. She was late for the airport, and she was got to it in time, but she was walking around in a duty free shop buying something, and people kept saying, "Oh, you look just like Michelle Gellar." Well, she wasn't wearing any makeup at all. That's why people didn't recognize what she looked like on film and TV. She just didn't have on her mascara or lipstick or whatever. So people are making too big a deal out of the tiny amount of makeup I wear, and I forbid and I defy anyone to call me a Jezebel. I don't do the tarted up, uh, you know, nobody's going to mistake me for being a prostitute, I guarantee. There are people who wear like 10 times the makeup I wear and don't suffer the abuse that I have over a wee bit of eyeliner or something. This is really getting ridiculous, people. But these are the people who are hiding behind facades. A tiny amount of makeup because you're real fair and want to make sure your eyes and lips pop a bit visually. These people are complete frauds. They are absolute fakers. The minister of that church talked about how it was really a front for a devil worshiping cult. He said they have ritualistic ceremonies where they try to bring people in to some kind of cabal or something. And I'm sitting here thinking this is one of the prettiest churches, and it's been here for decades. And he's been there for decades. And he started telling me all about how he was a complete fake while criticizing me for wearing makeup and having big feet and short fingernails. So I'm going to criticize him for being a drug addict and a drunk and a wife beater and a misogynist and a devil worshipping slime bag who pretends to be a religious leader and leading people to Christ. I'm starting to really hate people. And there are very, very few people who I think are worthy of trust and worthy of admiration, but they're out there. A lot of them are Jews. Some of the very, very, very most admirable people I have ever known, ever had the privilege and honor to know, were born and raised Jew. Some of them were converted, by choice. Some of the best people I've ever known really, really do follow the Christ and really get Christianity on a broader level than just taking money from the coffers of contributions and tithes every Sunday while pretending to be a Christian leader, while they admit if you get them in their office and you get them to talking the truth, that they're basically running a devil worshipping cabal disguised as a church. And then let's get to I'm wrapping this up here. I've got a couple of other short videos I'm going to make, but thank you for your time and attention because I did want to clarify that I'm not Jew bashing and I'm not Christian bashing. I'm I love both types of people as long as that's what they really are, as long as they're not faking their way through that and misusing the terms for themselves. I did meet a guy, I knew a guy for years ago. I met him in 2005. I attended what he calls an institute, but it's sort of a rainbow world, and they embrace, or they seem to embrace, a lot of different religious and philosophical paths. but he does call himself a Christian, and he does make a lot of money at that fake church, at that devil worshiping facade. One day I encountered him right after a sermon he had given, and his eyes were bright red. He looked like he was straight out of a horror movie. I was shocked. And I was about to call 911 and get him to get to the hospital. Something was very, very wrong with the capillaries and the whites of his eyes, right? He said not to call the police because he was on heroin. This is the minister of a church with more than 10,000 people as members. He said he was a charlatan. He started dancing around. He was with three women who were swooning and they couldn't even stand up. They looked all drunk to me. This is right after church. This is in front of the freaking church, man. And he said, seriously. And he said, I saw his wife walking around. She was a big deal in the church and she was carrying a lot of heavy equipment alone and she was glaring at him. Well, there's a pretty good reason they've subsequently divorced. Thank you, God. She had the courage to do that. But this guy starts talking about having a harem and how the three women who were swooning around saying his name over and over and acting really, really out of it, like drunk, stoned, something, probably all on heroin as well, said that he had a harem and did I want to join and be a member? And I said, no, thanks on that. And then he said that he considered us all marks and all the people who'd ever contributed to his coffers were just being, like being financially abused because he was a total lie. Apparently, heroin is a great disinhibitor. Apparently, when people do heroin, they become truth talkers finally and blurt out the truth to everyone who shows up willing to listen. And I was sitting there absorbing this because I was just so disgusted. I always thought he was a narcissist. I always thought he had histrionic personality disorder and was a bit of a drama queen, always wanting to be posing and, up on the stage and hey, everybody look at me. He was definitely a person with some what we call personality disorders. But I never thought he was a complete sociopath. And there he was. He also talked about being in human trafficking, said he was recruiting men to go into Mexico as well as Las Vegas and recruit women to be enslaved, to be trafficked. And he said he was dealing heroin and other drugs, including drugs that are frequently used in drug facilitated sexual assault. He was drugging people to use them as human trafficking victims. He also said he was money laundering. And he said, Nancy, if you ever get a business, I know you're real smart and talented, you got your entrepreneurial, thing on and you want to start a nonprofit too. If your businesses or your nonprofit ever get to where they're grossing about $1 million a year, watch out because that's when predators will sweep on and try to take it from you. And that's when they'll try to get you to launder money for them. I said, hey, thanks for the warning. Not going to happen. And I may get to that point where I have a business or a nonprofit that has a $1 million budget, but I'm not going to launder money for anyone. Get over that. And he also said, and here again, I'm going to wrap this up. Let's start a different video, a different live stream in a minute. He said, every time he needs another $1 million, he writes another book blaming people for their own problems. And what he does is he claims that if you've got cancer, you created it, or if your husband beats you, you attracted his fist to your face. And, he's like insane. He's like totally, willfully insane. And he said even he didn't believe any of that. He didn't believe it. He doesn't think. And I said, because I was calling him on his bleep. I said, come on, man. He said, no, he knows for an absolute fact that people don't create their own cancer. And he admitted that he'd beaten his wife and she didn't deserve it. And that's one of the reasons she was glaring at him. He'd shoved her against the refrigerator and almost broke her skull while being a big religious leader, right? With millions of dollars and 10,000 people in his little flock or herd of marks, he called them. And so he said that he was um, writing books with completely false stuff in it, like false philosophies, blaming people for creating their own problems. And he found that people, this is him, I'm quoting him now, he said, he found that people were so stupid, so appallingly stupid, that they'd line up and buy his books and get him to sign them and give him $1 million every time he wrote yet another book blaming them for generating all their own problems. Uh, Even though he knew it was completely false and he didn't believe that. Let's see, there was one other thing he said. Oh, yeah, yeah. I'll refer to him as Michael. And that's no archangel. That's a different one. Michael is my favorite archangel, but I'm not using that name by accident. Michael then said that he really don't know how much further. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go ahead and tell you this. This jerk, this horrifying jerk who frequently compares himself to the Dalai Lama and Martin Luther King and all the other great leaders of the world, he said that he makes money off of dying people two ways, and he felt kind of guilty about it. By this time, I think he was reacting a bit. His, heroin high was I was harshing his heroin high mellow because I just kept talking reason to him, talking the truth to him. I was kept telling him how astonished I was and disappointed in the kinds of things he was revealing to himself, about himself to me. And he said he felt kind of guilty because he makes money off of dying people two ways. I said, well, what are those ways? Pretty tell. And he said that he gets people to pay him to go to their homes when they're dying, their families, and they've already got a lot of medical bills or whatever, and he goes to their houses and prays for them and chastises them for using medical care. And he said, if only you were praying enough, you wouldn't be ill. You attracted this disease to yourself. And the person could be, and he said this, the person could be 98 years old and just dying of old age, but he'd say you attracted age. If only you believed enough and only you prayed enough, you wouldn't have gotten old. Not true, categorically false, noogies. And so he's blaming people for being ill to begin with and for, apparently being near the end of their lives, right? And he gets paid for that. And he said, then, lo and behold, their survivors pay him to officiate at their memorial services. And he said, bingo, he's just ka-chinged again. That's his term. This fake minister said he ka-chings again with members of the congregation actually die. And he was sitting there, he's like, he said that was easy money. And I thought, oh my God, this is a horrible person. I can't believe I ever listened to him for 1 minute as a person, preaching on stage. And he said he felt a little guilty about it because some of those people might have lived if he had told them to go to a doctor instead of try to pray away their issues. I said, you might very well be right. Counseling people to not seek medical care, but instead just pay you to raise some words over them is probably a form of con artistry, like all the other things. So one of the big whoop-de-doo religious leaders in Los Angeles, is a charlatan by his own admission, a drug dealer, a human trafficker, a money launderer, and a complete fraud. That's what I was talking about in the previous video when I was talking about fake rabbis and all that. Uh, I love some rabbis. I love lots of Jewish people. I love some Christian ministers. I love a lot of Christians. My very name is love. Get with the program there. So please don't misunderstand what I'd said before. I despise people who live behind a facade of lies. Because even Plato said thousands of years ago, we are here to be, not to seem. That's the direct translation of one of the greatest philosophers of all times. One of the essential statements of his whole philosophy was, we are here to be, not to seem. So if you're going to put yourself out as a religious leader of any faith, of any variety, try to actually be, number one, religious, and number two, an actual leader instead of a mere fraud. Yeah, think more later. Just getting started here.